No Small Endeavor is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Why do people commit themselves to the things they do? Why are people so worried about sport? Why wine? Why video games? I'm Brian Lowry, and in this season of my podcast, Know What You See, I'm asking a simple question, but a really big one. What's the point? In conversations with people with a variety of passions and obsessions, we get the chance to look through a window and see what it means to truly focus on a realm of human experience. Join me on Know What You See. New episodes begin November 26th.
I'm Lee C. Camp, and this is No Small Endeavor, exploring what it means to live a good life.
I was 24 when I won my first Grammy.
That's Russ Taff, 6-time Grammy winner whose career has spanned more than 4 decades.
And within an hour, all the joy's gone. And they gave it to the wrong person. And I don't deserve to be in front of all these people. I'm not good enough. So I opened a can and I drank it. Within 5, 6, 7 minutes, those condemning voices were gone.
Today, Russ tells stories from his life, his father, an alcoholic preacher, getting his family kicked out of multiple churches, a sudden successful music career that left Russ confused and ashamed, and the long journey of his own addiction and recovery. All coming right up. You'll often hear folks speak about red flags, the warning signs we should avoid. But what if we focused more on looking for green flags in friends or partners? That's one of the things therapy has helped me do and might help you do. Learn practices for relational flourishing and growth. And BetterHelp gives you access to 30,000 credentialed therapists serving 5 million people worldwide. Visit betterhelp.com/no small endeavor today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/no small endeavor.
We, the people, shape our country's story. America 250 is gearing up to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of America's democracy by collecting and preserving diverse stories from across the nation. Nominate any living person you think has a story to be preserved and celebrated for generations to come. Help tell our American story, every unique version of it. Visit america250.org/nominate to submit.
I'm Lee C. Camp. This is No Small Endeavor, exploring what it means to live a good life.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
Our guest today is singer Russ Taff. At age 70, he's out with a new album called Cover Story, comprising cover songs that tell the story of his life, with tracks by Prince, Bob Dylan, Depeche Mode, The National, U2, and others. Hailed by Billboard magazine as the single most electrifying voice in Christian music, Russ's career has now spanned more than 4 decades. With 6 Grammys and 16 Dove Awards, he was inducted into the GMA Hall of Fame an unprecedented 3 times as a soloist, as a member of the Imperials, and as a member of the Gaither Vocal Band. We talked today about his difficult childhood, his battle with alcohol, and 20 years of sobriety. It's a beautiful interview. Here's Russ Taff. Welcome, Russ Taff.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here.
It's great to have you with us. A career in music. I wonder, what's your very earliest memory of making music or listening to music?
Well, I grew up in a real small church. Daddy pastors, like 20 people. And so music was a big part of our church. And my mother was an incredible singer with her sisters. And she told me that I sang my first solo in church when I was 4. And she stood me up on the altar and, I did my song, of course, and I would do that periodically, maybe once or twice a month. And then I sang I have 4 brothers, and we sang together. And we would do quartet music. That's all that was around at the time was quartet music. And so we had a little quartet, but no, music was just always a part of my life. And it was the thing that when, that household just exploded with trauma and addiction, that was always a safe place.
So how did your parents meet then?
Hot Springs, Arkansas, there was a big Army-Navy hospital and wounded soldiers, traumatic things, and that sort of thing. And Dad was a sergeant there. And a lot of soldiers, they would bring there to recuperate, to heal. And Mom worked at it was called the Pink Elephant. It was a little meat and three kind of place. And he would go in and eat there. It had a really fancy for her, but she was so shy. She was just so shy, a little country girl. And so the story was that he said, I'm buying some presents for my family at home in Missouri. And so she would go with him and help him shop, and they would have coffee and things like that. And then eventually, when they started getting kind of close, he fessed up that, well, I don't have any family. I was just trying to get you to go out with me. So they dated a few years and got married, then headed to California also.
And then I would assume pretty hard scrabble life after he comes back from the war, or what's their life like at that point?
Yeah, it was, because he was a pretty heavy drinker. And when he came back, there were just periods of him just, I don't know if it's memories from the war. He never talked. They just never talked. But he would pull benders and things like that. But it took him a while to kind of get his legs out from underneath him. And he had what we call getting saved, where you go down to the front and ask Jesus to come into your heart. And his life really changed. It really changed. And so they both worked just to kind of make ends meet.
Yeah.
But every month she would save enough money to buy 2 LPs. But no TV, no radio, no newspapers, no magazines, nothing. Nothing. We were just kind of over in the corner waiting for Jesus to come back. And, women didn't shave their legs, and no jewelry and no cologne. It was almost cultish, where that's what they did. It was very old school, very legalistic, a lot of guilt around all that. So that's just the path that they followed.
And what's your earliest memories of realizing that sort of, you use the language cultish? When did you start getting a vibe of what's kind of going on around you? Or was it a long time until you began to look at it with a different set of eyes?
Well, that was my life, and we were in church 4 nights a week and Sunday morning. So 5 times a week you're in that building, and
4 nights a week beats most everybody I've ever heard of.
Then Sunday morning, gotta throw that in there. And so it was. That's just what we thought everybody did until I started getting a little bit older, and I began to see. I think I went and visited my cousin's church. They went to more of a Baptist-y kind of church, and I began to see this is a lot different than everybody else, to the point I wouldn't invite any of my friends because they rolled on the floor and they spoke in tongues and, just that sort of thing. Yeah. But they weren't involved with the world hardly at all. And so there was a lot of love for Jesus, but no wisdom.
And then at some point, your father kind of gets sideways with the church?
Mm-hmm. I was 7 years old. Dad didn't come to church. He was late, and he worked 6 days a week. And Mom sent me home. We lived a half a block from the church. And she said, go check on your dad and tell him that service has started. So I run home, and I go into our little shotgun house, and I heard him singing in the back, their back bedroom, but it sounded weird. It didn't sound like my dad. So I ran and got Mom and brought her back home. And as soon as she saw Dad, his name was Joe, she just started crying, saying, oh, Joe, oh, Joe, oh, Joe, because we didn't know that he was an alcoholic before he found religion. So that started the rest of his life of having like 1 year sobriety and then relapsing, 6 months sobriety and relapsing, and that went on till he died. But yeah, that's when the music stopped. And unfortunately, and it happened again, They asked us to leave the church at 7, and a lot of them were family members.
They asked you to leave the church when you were 7.
Well, because Daddy, you can't have a pastor drunk. And I remember when I was 13, and I was going down Sunday night and playing my guitar, singing, and Dad relapsed big time. And Mama, because I was a guy, man, whatever, sent me down to the church so I could hear what everybody said so I could go back and tell her. And I just sat there and cried. And I go home and I tell her, but they voted him out on Friday. So Sunday night, I got my little cardboard box guitar and I head down there and I open the front door to walk in. And my uncle, who had taken over interning kind of pastor, grabbed me by the arm and he said, "Russ, what are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to sing my song." And he said, "No, you're not." And I said, "Uncle, I didn't do anything wrong." And he said, "I don't care. You're his son, and we don't want you here." And so I walked back home crying. And so the world that I knew of music, it just stopped. And I had no place to go. And the worst beating I ever got in my life was I was 9, and you can't talk outside the family. You just can't. Because you're supposed to be perfect. Nobody is, but that's what they teach. The pastor's supposed to be. And I told a little friend I was spending the night with that Mom and Dad had an argument. And my older brother heard me, and he told Mom, and she was waiting for me when I got back home. And when I walked in, she made me sit down, and then she just started screaming at me, "You don't tell anybody what goes on in this family." And came over and started slapping me in the face and screaming, "You don't tell anybody what goes on in this family." And I wound up just balled up in the corner with her just kicking and screaming. I had to wear long sleeve shirts to school for like 2 weeks because of all the bruises and stuff. So, but then it started when I was 12, and they call it emotional incest, where one of the parents turned to one of the children like a spouse to talk to. And for some reason, my mother chose me. I had 3 older brothers, but for some reason, she chose me. And she would come into my bedroom, and I'd have to sit up, and she would just start dumping her fear and saying, "We're probably not going to be able to make our house payment next month, and I don't know if we'll have lunch money," and all of her fear, because she couldn't talk outside the family either. And so she would put all of it on me, and then she would go to bed, and I'd sit up all night just terrified. And this went on night after night after night. There was no place to go. Nobody wanted me, and nobody was coming. My family members, "Russ, how are you?" You know, we were just shunned. And Mama had a key to the church, and when she would just dump on me and just scare the ever-loving hell out of me, I would go down there and I would open up the church like 11 o'clock at night, because when the addiction's going in the home, you can stay out till 5 in the morning. Nobody cares. And I would feel my way to the front and not turn on the lights. And I would just sit on a pew, or I'd kneel at the altar, and I would just start telling Jesus how scared I was. And that was the only place I could talk. So night after night after night, after she would dump on me, I would go down there and just sit and talk to him like I'm talking to you, and tell him how scared I was, how afraid, and I don't know what's going to happen and what's happening in our home. And somehow that made a connection between he and I that wasn't like anything else. And it wasn't like a Pentecostal church. It was a kid sitting and talking to a higher power that he really didn't know, but just telling him what was going on in my life. And then I would go home and I'd feel a little better and get up and go to school. But it was a lonely teenage year, just those early teenage years.
So during that time when your father is relapsing, getting sober, relapsing, getting sober, what's kind of become your role in the family in that?
I was the peacemaker. I was the one that kept everything together. And Mama really leaned on me, and my brothers just checked out as soon as they could.
Were you the oldest?
No, I was number 4.
Number 4.
Number 4 until then, Vietnam, they both went when they were 19. And so I became the one that was between mom and dad, when all these fights would break out and stuff. And at 15, I made the decision for us to move back to Arkansas. Mom just collapsed. I mean, she just collapsed. And she was the only one working, and she was frying hamburgers at the time, and Dad couldn't work. So there was a church in Hot Springs that Dad would hold revivals in the summer. And they knew what was going on, and they called Mom and said, "We will help if you think you can make it back here." And so got a guy that could drive. Mama couldn't drive, and I wasn't old enough, but we found this guy to drive us, and we just loaded Daddy in the back of the station wagon drunk and took off driving to Hot Springs. And he sobered up for 2 years. 2 years. And did really good, and then relapsed again, and they asked us to leave that church. So anyway, I left home at 17, and the hardest thing of it, and well, there's a lot of hard things, but the message that we were given, me and my brothers, and it was given to them by their parents, is daily, you're not worth the bullet shoot you with, not worth the salt that goes on your bread, and you will never amount to anything. And after a while, you start believing it, Shame was just something that, it was like a jacket that fit really good, really, really good. And I could put it on so fast. First of all, that transferred shame of what was happening with Dad and the way I was treated, and then just made to feel unworthy, that you're not good enough from that religion, and you'll never be good enough, and you got to try harder. And it was always holding a carrot out in front of the donkey, but you could never catch it. You had to do more, had to do better. And it was my senior year of high school. I was 16. I put a little band together, and there was no contemporary Christian music we couldn't find anywhere. And so just for our high school, and I always loved Jesus. I always did, even with all the chaos and everything. It was going down at church and talking to him. And I asked the principal if he would let my little band play at an assembly. And I was after him like 3 months. And finally he said, okay. And so when the assembly was over, we played 2 songs, and Dad was pastoring and doing well. And I said, can we have a Monday night service that none of the deacons and elders would come to? And he kind of worked it out. So Monday night, it was just full of kids wanting to hear a band. And of course, it had Christian lyrics to it. And it was called the Jesus Movement. But Dad relapsed, and everything just came to a screeching halt. We were asked to leave the church. I was asked to leave the church, and the band just kind of dismantled.
So you've had this repeated experience of the church telling you just to leave. Looking back, how would you describe what that is doing to you as a kid?
You don't trust people. They'll turn on you in a heartbeat. And you certainly can't tell them what's going on inside of you. And so you're just kind of empty and hollow. And you go through the motions, and he's sober and he's pastoring again, and you go, but you don't trust him. If I had my way, if I had my way, if I had my way, I would tear this building down.
You're listening to No Small Endeavor and our conversation with Russ Taff. I love hearing from you. Tell us what you're reading, who you're paying attention to, or send us feedback about today's episode. You can reach me at lee@nosmallendeavor.com. You can get show notes for this episode in your podcast app or wherever you listen. These notes include links to resources mentioned in the episode, as well as a PDF of my complete interview notes and a full transcript. We would be most delighted if you tell your friends about No Small Endeavor and invite them to join us on the podcast, because that invitation helps extend the reach of the beauty, truth, and goodness we are seeking to sow in the world. Thanks so much for inviting others to join us. Coming up, Russ tells the story of his music career, from winning his first Grammy when he was 24 to entering a downward spiral of mirroring his father's self-hatred and addiction, and finally, all the wisdom and healing from recovery and 20 years of sobriety.
She sat down on Samson's knee. She said, "Tell me where your strength lies, if you please." She spoke so fine and talked so...
You're back in Arkansas, and you started this band. At some point, you get connected with the Imperials.
Yeah. Contemporary Christian music was, nobody knew what it was because it hadn't been, Larry Norman hadn't come out with anything yet. So we were taking Beatles songs and rewriting them, and they were horrible. I want to hold God's hand. I want to hold God's hand.
Oh.
So you had us with, loud guitars and drums, and then the next thing was the Happy Goodmans or the Statesman Quartet. Yeah. So we were trying to bring in the Imperials. We're kind of in the middle. They were doing a little more aggressive than just Southern gospel. So we raised money and did car washes and all kind of stuff and raised enough money to bring them in. And they let my little band do 20 minutes before they came on.
Opening for them.
And we did, 5 songs? I forget what it was. And I knew they were going to pull us up for the encore, and I was going to get to stand up there with them. And so I had a friend that was very, very shy, and I gave him that little camera, that long one that had the 4 bulbs that would flash. And so I'm up there with him and doing one song, the big encore, and he jumps up and takes one picture and sets back down. And I knew I had 3 more shots left, and I was trying, come on. And he's too shy to get up and do it. So I ran to Kmart, took a week, to get him back, and I'm thumbing through it, and I found the photo, and it's 9 guys waist down. My first contact with professional gospel music, 9 guys waist down.
The budding showman knows what a wasted opportunity it was.
The band broke up. We were all 18, couldn't get along. And so there was an evangelist that had heard me sing, and I'd met him, and he did what he said. He was a man of integrity. And if he told you something, he would do it. Huh. And he asked me to start traveling with him when I was 19. And then I would take my acoustic and sing some songs, and he would get up and preach. But he told me the truth. And I'd never been around a man that he did what he said, and whatever he preached, he did, and disciplined about it. And so he began to teach me those principles too, of how to be an honorable man. And so I started traveling with him, and I was dating Tori. I met her. I was working on a farm, and they had a little pavilion that we started having church on Sundays. And I did a weekend retreat. There were bunkhouses, and there wasn't that many people, but she came walking in the back door, and my world stopped. I mean, my world stopped. And she was funny and witty, and we laughed a lot. And so we started dating, and I would drive back from Fort Worth and, to Hot Springs and spend, when I wasn't on the road with the preacher, I would spend Friday night, Saturday, and then drive back Sunday night and go back to work Monday. But we were talking about getting married, but there was just no money, and she knew my heart. Music was my passion, and I didn't know if I was good enough. And she just encouraged me that let's wait to get married. Let's wait to get married, and, I'll be with you and support you in whatever way I can. And somehow the Imperials tracked me down to Fort Worth. They said, would you come to Nashville and try out?
Huh.
And I drive to Nashville, and they hired me that night. And I climbed on a bus and just started. But man, it was like taking a fire hose and sticking it in my mouth and turning it on full blast.
Because you're just like on the road all the time.
Yeah, and I'm in a world I know nothing about, and you can't go to college and figure out how to do this. And so there were all kind of emotion. There was excitement. There was fear. Singing to crowds. I think the largest crowd I ever sang to was 200 people. And all of a sudden, my first night with them, there's 6,000. I sang with my eyes closed. I was so scared. And we were on the road 290 days a year.
Wow.
And come home. But because we didn't have kids, Tori could travel with me. She loved the band. She loved the bus. And we had so much fun just being kids out there. And then 5 years later, it's time to go solo, and we had so much fun. We were young and just digging this life, and so she just traveled with me for almost 15 years till we started a family.
I understand that one significant development in your story, you began drinking at some point on the bus?
Yeah. It was actually, I never touched liquor because of my dad. I never drank at all. In fact, I would go play golf with my buddies here, and when we'd finish up 18, they'd have a Bud Light and I'd get a Coke and we would go home. But those voices of shame constantly, you're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. And I remember I was 24 when I won my first Grammy. And you're at the party and, we're staying at the Biltmore and Shrine Auditorium in this big whole production and stuff. And we win. And we go back to the hotel after the parties, Tori and I, and by the time I got back to the hotel, they gave this to the wrong person. I don't deserve this. I'm not good enough for this. And within an hour, all the joy's gone. Just that you'll never amount to anything, you'll never be good enough, and you're not worth the salt and that sort of thing. And so I would stand and sing in front of so many people. And I'd go back to the bus, and it's like I'm a fraud. They don't know that I'm not that good, that I will never amount to anything, but here I am, and nothing makes sense. It's all just, why is this happening? And honest to God, it was like my brain was being pulled apart. Nothing made sense because I felt horrible, and that religion taught me to hate myself, but yet I'm having all this success. And I was 26, and I was the fifth floor apartment in July, and it was hot. And Tori was out shopping. I think she's at Bloomingdale's, and I'm out alone in the apartment. Now, beer was not a taboo. I mean, my buddies drank it, and my pastor even back then would have wine with dinner. So there wasn't like this big, I'd shaken a lot of that Pentecostalism. And so I'm in the apartment by myself, and there's no more Cokes, but there were 3 Heinekens in the refrigerator. And it wasn't like this voice screaming, no, 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 no. It was because my dad drank vodka. So this is just beer, And so I opened a can, Heineken. I never tasted beer before. And I drank it, like half of it. And I turned it up because it was so hot, and I hated the taste of it. But I finished it. Within 5, 6, 7 minutes, those voices got quieter. And I immediately had the second one, and the voices got even quieter. And by the third one, those condemning voices were gone. And I looked up toward heaven, and I began to thank God, I can live this way. This must be the way normal people feel. But immediately, I started hiding. My buddies didn't hide when they had a beer, but immediately I started hiding in that euphoria of those voices being silent. And I could stand on that stage. Things began to shift in my brain, and I could stand and sing. And with no condemnation in my head. And man, I would throw my head back because those voices were silent. Not knowing that within a short amount of time, it's going to turn on me. I got Daddy's gene. I've had 3 brothers die from addiction later on. Of course, Dad never sobered up. And so within 3 or 4 months, hiding, and having it in the back of the bus as soon as the concert was over, I would head back there. And you talking about hating yourself. I turned into my dad. And I got to a point I would try to shave. And if I tear up, just without looking myself in the eye, because I hated me. I turned into the thing I hated in him. Now I'm doing it. And so, it went on for a long time of just hiding. I never drank around anybody. I was a closet drinker. And I would wait till I was alone. And, or I would wait till my wife went to bed and asleep. And then I would, I'd finish off that bottle of gin and I would sneak in. I just wanted to be numb. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to be numb. Never liked the taste of any of it, but it made me numb because I hated myself. I'll never amount to anything. And all of these voices, they were magnified by 10,000 now. And I would stand on stage and sing gospel music and just felt like the biggest hypocrite in the world. And I would beg God. I would beg him, please help me, please help me, please help me. And knew nothing about AA or that. But anyway, it led me down a road for almost 6 years of just self-hatred, self-loathing. I wanted to be numb all the time. And the band starts seeing my personality change. And Tori knows something horrible is going on with me because I just detached from everybody. And so, yeah, I was in quite a mess. I didn't know you could hate yourself that much. Because I went against everything I sang about, everything I believed. And I did not know what to do. I'm trapped. I can't stop drinking. I'm terrified people are going to find out. And I would do my best not to drink for a show. But it would be waiting at the hotel for me. And I could not wait to get back and shut my brain off. I just wanted to be numb all the time. And never hurt my singing. I just kept getting better, winning more Grammys. And but you go when it's over and you hate yourself. So you're not enjoying anything, nothing.
And then at what point did you begin to try to get help or change of course?
In Arkansas, when I left home and Mom and Dad moved back to California because they threw him out of that church, my senior high teacher, my last year, she saw my grades plummeting. And she asked me, she said, do you think you could move in with us just to get out of that family system? Because your body is just betraying you. And so I moved in with them. And of course, they actually were my family by choice. But they didn't know what was going on with me. They just saw me again changing and trying to stay away from everybody. But
so you had stayed in touch with them through all these years?
Yeah. Thanksgiving, Christmas. But I would do my best not to drink at all because I didn't want to unbreath. But as soon as it was over, I'd have a fight with Tori so I could leave. But one day she confronted me. And she said, Russ, I think you have a problem. And I think you're an alcoholic. Now that broke my heart because your mother, that you loved. But I don't know if I'd have heard it from anybody else.
We're going to take a short break, but coming right up, Russ talks about the trauma therapy that led him to forgiving his parents, celebrating 20 years of sobriety, and a brand new album that if this were not on the radio, I just might need an expletive to say how good it is.
Grandma's hands, she played that tambourine so well. Grandma's hands used to issue out.
Hey there. Did you know that we have a newsletter? Just imagine if you could have one of your favorite ethics professors send you a list of things to reflect on, think about, practical actions with which to experiment, all on your way to sorting through what it might mean to live a good life. Well, that is the NSC Notebook. I riff on themes and topics related to the show and our guests. Sign up for my NSC notebook today at nosmallendeavor.com/newsletter.
I still didn't sober up. I just left, and go back to Nashville and get back in this of a life I was living. But there was a friend that kind of saw what was going on, and we were friends. And I finally confided in him everything that I was doing. And he was safe from me. He wasn't, going to First Baptist Church. He was just a regular guy, but had a whole lot of wisdom. And we began to talk. And he said, have you ever thought about going to AA? And no. And well, why not? Well, if I go there, here I am, this highly decorated gospel singer. And if I'm spotted and it gets out, then, back this town could not be kind at times. And so I hesitated, but it got so bad. My wife was going to leave me, and we didn't have kids yet. But so I was supposed to tour Australia for a 30-day tour in Australia, but my wife had just said, I'm leaving, unless you get help. So my manager canceled that tour, and I went into treatment. But I started going to AA some. Sitting in the back with a hat pulled down low. But I started hearing stuff, and I was like, that's my story. Well, that's my story. And all of a sudden, I began to understand that's me. That's what they're talking about is me. So anyway, I go to treatment in Knoxville. They didn't want me. I didn't want to be in Nashville here. There was Cumberland Heights, what I went to later, went to that treatment center there. I had to make several trips through treatment centers to get a hold of this. But I began to face what I was doing. And there were people there, there were therapists there that, that could start talk to me about what was going on in me that scared the crap out of me. And I ran from myself. And so I come back and I start going to AA. And I'd never known acceptance like this. I mean, they didn't judge me. They treated me like one of them, and they just brought me in and put their arms around me. And for the first time, I was with a group that I felt safe with, that I could say what was going on inside of me. So anyway, 3 weeks. I relapsed after 3 weeks. So I talked to my sponsor. I was so humiliated, and here comes all that shame and guilt again. I failed. And he said, all right, the next meeting, there is a silver chip called a desire chip in AA. And if you want to try this way of life again, or for the first time, you go forward and they have a chip system there. And you take this chip, say, I want to try to stay sober 24 hours. And so at the end of the meeting, I stand up, and a lot of these people, they had worked with me, and I was so humiliated. And all of that childhood shame, all of these all came back. I mean, I failed. And I walked to the front, and I took my little white chip, and I was going to have to turn around and face them. And it's like, how can I get back to my seat with my eyes closed? But when I turned around, they applauded and clapping. Try it again, Russ. Come on, Russ, try it again. And they just encouraged me and loved me. And man, that was infectious. I'd never had that in my life. So that was the start of trying a new way of life.
Yeah. You mentioned that later you'd have to learn to finally deal with the childhood trauma. Can you kind of tell us some of the things you had to learn or let go of or embrace in you to do that?
Mm-hmm. I go out to California where my dad had passed away. And I'm standing at his casket looking at it. And you're supposed to love him because he's your dad, but you hate him. And it's just like this eruption goes off in your brain. I love him, I hate him, I love him, I hate him. And my brain just starts spinning out like this. And I know within 10 minutes or less, it's all going to go away. So I go buy a fifth of whiskey, and it all goes away, but I blew my world up again. Absolutely blew my world up again, and having to start from scratch, back to treatment. And I had 9 years, and my mother dies. And I go back out there, and again, I'm standing at the casket. She's your mother. You're supposed to love her. But then why did you put us through that? Why didn't you rescue us? Why did you let him do what he did to us, and what you did to us, and what you did to me? 12 years old. I knew with the fifth of whiskey it'd all go away. And you can't think about 2 weeks from now. You can't. All you think about is right now, and this is so intense, I can't deal with it. So another fifth of whiskey, my world blows up again, and I'm back in treatment, and thank God for Cumberland Heights. Had to get my degree from there several times. But a therapist that I've been in therapy most of my adult life. She said, until we deal with your childhood trauma, you will never stay sober. Every time a family member dies, or every time all that's triggered from you, you're going to relapse. She said, there is this place in Santa Fe, New Mexico called Life Healing Center. And it's dual diagnosis, childhood trauma and addiction. Now, I was about to lose everything again. My band didn't want to go out with me anymore because I wasn't mean. I was just detached. I never saw him till I walked out on stage. And Tori, she just had enough. So I go to this place. And when I got there, they said, draw a picture of your higher power because you're going to need them. And in AA, you're not going to stay sober without higher power. And of course, mine has always been Jesus. That's the one I've always related to. So I drew this stick figure of Jesus and I put him in my room. And it's group therapy, it's singles therapy. And again, just starting to dig down in there. And after 2 weeks of that, the head therapist, brilliant guy, he said, okay, Russ, bring your picture of your higher power today. You're going to need him. And the only way I can describe it is like if that wall over there is stacked with gum wrappers, just gum wrappers, you throw the gum wrappers over there, and it's all the way up to the top. And somehow they had built a filter inside of me that was ready to deal with all of that. And it started after 2 weeks, and they said, let's go back to your earliest memory, what you can remember. And I remember being 3, and my mother slapping me to the ground, shaming me. And then when other memories kind of start coming, once you let that out, because you don't remember a lot from that trauma from your childhood, but they'd run that through the filter and lay it over there. And here's another memory, run it through this filter and lay it over there. I did that for 3 weeks, crying my eyes out every day, just memory after memory after memory. And after 3 weeks, all the gum wrappers were gone, and I didn't hate my parents anymore. I saw them as victims, just like me. And when all of that was eliminated from your thing that just held you constantly in your brain, there's just peace. Because all of those things that drive me to drink when he died and all of that, it was dealt with. It's like, and I don't know how it happened, but it happened. And I began to get acceptance of who I was. Yeah, I failed. I did. So, okay, so I did. So that was the start of this journey of just getting better and having great people around me, great sponsors around me. I had no idea life could be this good. Mm-hmm. I've been sober 20 years, and I had no idea you could be this happy.
And you're celebrating a brand new album.
Yeah.
Cover Story. 70 with a brand new album.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you.
Different kind of album for you.
Yes, very much so.
Tell us about the genesis of how this came to be.
Well, it was by accident, just absolutely by accident. Steve Taylor, which you're very good friends with him.
Yeah.
he had a band in the 80s called Chagall Guevara. And they never really toured, but they did several records. And they were having a 30-year reunion at the Ryman. After the concert, they were having like an afterglow the next night, Monday night. They invited me if I wanted to, asked me if I would sing. Jimmy Abegg, who's Steve's for a while, his band leader back then, and he was kind of putting up the band, and he came to me and he said, Russ, he said, let's go ahead and do Down in the Lowlands, but let's do it more blues. And we'll just turn it into something that it's never been before. And we get out there and count off and went into the song. And it had a more of a soulful groove than the record did. So when it was over, my Lord, the place was just erupting. And I go backstage and the band's there and they said, we got to make a record. Well, I've heard that before, and you have too. People say, we're going to do this with you, we're going to do this with you, and it sounds good, but sometimes it just doesn't pan out. And man, that'd be great if it happens. But there was a guy there that said, I will fund this record. And he asked Steve if he would executive produce it. And Steve said yes. And the three of us got together and we just started throwing songs in. Didn't write any of them. They're all cover songs from stuff that I used, part of my journey that I just told you about, pieces of my journey and places and songs that just kind of fit that. And we threw in, I don't know, we probably had 15 songs or something, and we started editing down to 11. And I had to do some real soul searching because it took a lot of faith for me to go say, okay, Steve, I'm going to trust you with this. And I had a meltdown one day, just a meltdown, because I couldn't see the finished product. Steve could, I couldn't. And he said, Russ, just trust me. I won't let you embarrass yourself.
I'll tell you that after I listened through the album the first time, I sent a text to Steve that started with an expletive because I just thought it was so good. It deserved an expletive because it's really moving and really beautiful.
Oh, man.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
It's really great. I want to end with one last question. You've used the word wisdom twice. I think early in the interview, you said that there were a lot of people in that childhood church context who loved God but lacked wisdom. And then I don't remember who you were referring to later, but someone who came into your life in a constructive, helpful way, loving way, and you spoke of his wisdom. What's kind of a pursuit of wisdom meant to you? What's it looked like?
Well, to pursue wisdom, you have to let go of what you perceive. It's almost like you got to die to self to change. Because when I think I got it all figured out, I'm so dangerous, but wisdom has been the thing that saved me. And letting go of those old thoughts, those old memories. And wisdom for me has been help me identify why I did what I did. Help me see that part of me that would fight for control when I needed to surrender and let somebody else help me. It took a whole lot for me to say, I need help. But that was my wisdom because I saw just how me driving this truck, I ran it in the ditch. All right, I'm not a good driver. I need help. And I began to see wisdom as a way out for me. But wisdom for me is being able to look at something, look at it from all the sides. Now, where am I getting in a way with myself? What do I need to let go here so I can pick this up? Because I am constantly changing. Even after 20 years of sobriety, I'm still changing. I'm still pursuing truth. I'm still pursuing wisdom. And I want to be better, and I've got to have more wisdom to get better. But it's become an important word for me. It really has. It's wisdom and knowledge. And you know that Old Testament about when Solomon, when God said, what you want, I'll give it to you. And he said, I want wisdom and I want knowledge. And that has been one of the things that has saved my butt is wisdom and knowledge to try to figure out why am I doing what I'm doing and not just continue to do it hoping it gets better.
Yep. It's a beautiful picture for us to end on. We've been talking to Russ Taff many decades into a beautiful career in music, celebrating a brand new album, Cover Story. And Russ, I can say that Buddy Green, for all 10 years ago, saying you need to sit down with Russ Taff was exactly right. It's been a delight to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for letting me be on your show.
Thank you.
Need a friend to do some dying with you. I'll be there.
You've been listening to No Small Endeavor and our interview with Russ Taff about his new album, Cover Story. We gratefully acknowledge the support of Lilly Endowment Incorporated, a private philanthropic foundation supporting the causes of community development, education, and religion. Our thanks to all the stellar team that makes this show possible: Christy Bragg, Jacob Lewis, Sophie Byard, Tom Anderson, Kate Hayes, Mary Evelyn Brown, Carriet Harmon, Jason Sheasley, Audrey Griffith, and Tim Lauer. And special thanks to Andy Gullahorn and Steve Taylor. Thanks for listening, and let's keep exploring what it means to live a good life together. No Small Endeavor is a production of PRX, Tokens Media, LLC, and
Great Feeling Studios.
From PRX.